General Services Committee will now come to order. We have a quorum present. We will take up items 3 through 11 together.
Item number 3 and et al. To 11, City Attorney Report resolutions relative to request or destroy certain obsolete records from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation and the Personnel Department.
Okay.
My name is Eileen Shapiro. I'm with the City Clerk's Office, Records Management Division. And since we're doing 3 through 11, I just wanted to point out item number 11 having to do with the City Attorney Report and Resolution to destroying the Workers' Comp Division records has not been approved by the City Attorney. It was just submitted to the council by mistake. So requesting that be received and filed.
Receive and file number 11?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be hearing items 3 through 10 at this time.
Okay.
Item 11 will receive and file.
Okay. And 3, I guess we can start with the one for, there's one other one for requesting approval just of the custody case medical files. That's the item number
7?
7 is the City Attorney Report and Resolution on requesting to destroy records from the Personnel Department Medical Services Division. And in the letter from the City Attorney, the City Attorney is requesting that only the records labeled custody case medical treatment file be requested for destruction at this time.
Okay, so that's with that amendment, so those
Yeah,
files.
it would just be approving those custody case treatment files, and the rest are not approved for the destruction at this time.
Okay. Any questions? No. Okay. No questions from the members of this committee. Is there anybody here to speak on items 3 through 10? We are taking up items 3 through 10 at this time. Seeing no one come forward, we do not have any public comment cards for these items. Public comment on these items will be closed. Therefore, action of this committee is to approve those recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that amendment. Okay, with that, we will announce once again that item number 11 is receive and file. And so we go to item number 1.
Item number 1, GSD report relative to approval of a new parking license agreement with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power at 605 East Temple Street.
Good afternoon, Lourdes Owen from Asset Management General Services. This is a request for approval to negotiate and execute a new parking license agreement with the Department of Water and Power at 605 East Temple Street for parking purposes. The parking is to allow large city vehicles serving personnel and medical services building to have temporary parking privilege close to the aforementioned building. The lease is for a term of 5 years commencing on April 1, 2009, and the area is for 10,880 square feet or a quarter of an acre. And the rental rate is $30,363 for 5 years, for approximately, and this is a technical correction, is 0.465 square feet, rounded to 0.05 per square foot per month. And the rent payment will be a rent service credit to GSD for DWP payments that is routinely paid to the Personnel Department for personnel-related services to DWP.
So actually, it's about $6,000 a year,
Correct.
so $30,363 over a 5-year period.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? No. Okay. There are no questions from the committee at this time. We're on item number 1. Is anybody here to speak on item number 1? Public comment is open on item number 1. Seeing and hearing no one come forward, there are no public comment cards filled out on item number 1. Public comment on item number 1 is not closed. With that, it is the committee's action to approve this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move to item number 2.
Item number 2, motion, Han Parks, relative to issuing a request for proposals to identify a developer for the establishment of the Lansett Industrial Park on city-owned property at 930 East 111th Place. The Housing Community and Economic Development Committee has waived consideration of this matter. Additionally, it is scheduled for council consideration on July 10, 2009.
This one I do have some questions on.
Robert Science, Assistant General Manager, CDD. We're here to answer any questions. Ninos Benjamin, our Chief of Economic Development Division, will present.
Okay. Now we're looking to identify a developer to do what?
To ground lease the site, retain a brokerage firm to identify tenant, develop the site,
Okay.
and hold it as a leasehold interest.
What is the interest of the city in this?
City
If
owns
this go
the,
forward, what would the city's interest be?
city owns the site,
Okay, currently?
currently owns the site, and there will be a leasehold interest by whoever is the developer in the site. So we have an economic interest, the site to be developed and targeted jobs to be created. City has invested substantial amount of money in its acquisition, in infrastructure, utilities that were brought to the site. City has invested in excess of $5 million so far, and we have an interest for this to be developed, for the targeted jobs to be created on this property.
Okay, so they've invested $5 million so far, and they anticipate there'll be some additional $1 million of costs when it comes to cleaning up of the site?
Yes, additional $1 million is needed for remediation of underground waters.
Okay. And how much did we acquire the site for?
Site was acquired for $2.5 million in August of 1994.
So $2.5 million to acquire plus the $6 million for cleanup?
We have, so far, the city has spent $2.5 million CDBG for acquisition. We have received $1.6 million of EDA grant, and spent another $1.3 million in CDBG and the Public Works Fund. Total, we have spent $5,600,000.
Aside from the 2.5 or including the 2.5?
Including 2.5.
Okay. And it's 9 acres?
9.06 acres.
Okay. Now, what do we expect to get from a deal like this with a developer? Are we just investing this $6 million or so and then turning it over to a developer so that they could build out the site so that we can get tenants and business activity there? What is the builder going to give us $30 million over the next 30 years to have the right to do so? I mean, what are we looking at?
Sure. This site was appraised about a year ago, unfortunately for only $600,000. The reason for that extremely low appraisal value was very low rents in the area and a lot of baggages attached with development of the site. Although the grounds is remediated, there is addition. They have to be they have to meet certain requirements. Whoever builds on this site, you cannot build big square footages. It should be only tilt-up, 2-story at most, and they have to have significant thickness of the mat foundation. So the cost of construction leases are so low in the area that property was appraised extremely low. Because of that, idea is no longer to sell the property. Rather,
$600,000 for 9 acres. Why don't we just make it a park?
the idea is therefore to lease it for not to sell it, since there's no sales value, we are leasing it rather for a developer to come and build, because we are, what
We're
lacks,
talking a long-term lease. We're not going to lease it for 5 to 10 years. What are we looking at, 30 years,
20.
40, 50 years,
it should, 20 years.
20 years?
Years.
And it's the job creation is really the interest that we have to pay back in terms of the value to the city. There'd be approximately
346 jobs have to be created on this site with the money invested.
Because of the money that the city chose to use
Right.
to
Economic
acquire the
development
site.
restriction.
And what was the reason why we acquired the site?
It has a history that's beyond us, going back to the early 90s.
Incinerator project years ago. This is where they were gonna, Gilbert Lindsay was here, they were gonna build an incinerator there, and it fell, it's been redeveloped.
Well, hold on, come forward. If you have something to add, and if you feel you're accurate, please help us understand what we're dealing with.
I'm sorry, Greg Dimmitt, CDD. That was the Lancers site. That was the former incinerator site. This has nothing to do with
This
that.
is not the incinerator site.
That's correct.
So it was an old Brownsfield site that's been right
It
behind
was a
Maxine Waters.
Caltrans yard when we bought it.
Okay, we bought it off of Caltrans.
That's correct.
And then we bought it from Caltrans, and then we chose to take on millions of dollars worth of cleanup?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't we get Caltrans to do the cleanup?
Don't know the history back then. We inherited the project in terms of CDD from
Yeah, but
CRE.
now,
Yeah.
now us as policymakers, we're inheriting all of this garbage. Because it sounds like garbage to me. I'm not saying that you're giving me garbage.
Right.
You're telling me, it sounds like so far you're being very careful to answer carefully, and you're answering truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, how did we get here? And the reason why I need to know that is because I, as a policymaker, refuse to go ahead and say, well, this is just a terrible situation. Looks like we've already spent $5+ million on it. Okay, why don't we just go ahead and continue to do dumb things? That's not the way I operate.
Right.
So what you're going to need to be ready to do, well, you need to be ready before this item can pass through this committee, is you need to find out when we acquired it, what the documentation was that caused us to say that we should acquire it, what research did we do to estimate what the cleanup costs would be, did we meet or exceed those cleanup expectations as far as what we thought needed to happen, and how much we thought we were going to spend, okay? Because when you look at it just at 9 acres, that's a pretty good piece of property. But when you tell me that it's really not worth much, and then the last time it was appraised was $600,000, that comes out to, what, 60, 70,000 an acre or something like that?
Right. So it's
No, 50-some thousand an acre. 50,000 an acre.
Right.
I don't know if land that's already been cleaned up anywhere in Southern California that's only worth 50,000 an acre. Help me.
Honestly, we are in similar predicaments of,
Oh, we have more properties like this?
no, my mean is, we are the same concerns, we have the same questions, but situations right now, the money is invested, and the acquisition of the site, money spent was all done with certain council actions at the time.
Yeah,
We-
blame it on us. And we deserve the blame, whoever the we were when these decisions were made.
So at this moment, there is a 9.9 acre site, clean, and it is vacant. Until very recently, we were negotiating with a certain developer in order for them to buy it, and in fact, we have an approval from HUD for additional $6 million 108 loan, another $950,000 Betty grant for the site, and now we have some allocation recommendation from CDBGR for this site also, in order for this site to be developed, because this is a large site and it's very important to be developed for the jobs to be created at least. Now, the two choices, either to sell the site or lease the site. Since right now there's no market, based on appraisal also we have, there's no market to sell the site. Idea is just to lease the site, not to sell it. and have a developer come and build on it.
What's wrong with us acting like a bunch of bureaucrats and just sitting on it for a few more years until the market does come back?
The reason for that would be, we have 108 loan and BEDI grants which will expire in 2012.
Okay. What triggers the expiration? The fact that the development is not finished, or the fact that we don't have it under contract with somebody to develop it? What is the trigger to expire?
Trigger is we have to have a borrower to be able to draw that money. And also, for the cleanup of underground waters, we need additional $1 million.
Okay.
An idea is to draw the money from BEDI grant from HUD for the cost of remediation, to pay for it. If we do not have a borrower, we cannot draw that money from HUD to expend for remediation of underground waters.
Okay.
So it's very important that we, as soon as possible, in fact, we find a developer that comes in and develop this site. It's about 180,000 square feet of industrial, by right can be built on it. There are some ideas that alternative use might be also available. We are investigating that at the moment. But idea is to have an RFP for developers to come with their proposals for leasing and developing the site. We will come back within 60 or 90 days with a recommendation to council for recommendation for your approval of the selected developer.
For our approval of...
The developer of business plan, what needs to be done on this site. All what we are doing right now, we are asking for request to do an RFP to select a developer. That's all.
That's all.
That's all at the moment.
Which is the second of the last step.
Second, not really, because we have to, when we have a developer, we select, we have to enter into an agreement. We need authorities to enter into those agreements with them. That's correct.
So one of the last steps.
One of the last
You're
steps.
here at one of the last steps.
That's correct.
Technically.
That's correct.
Not the second of the last.
Correct.
Any questions?
Yes, well, we just had this, in the stimulus committee?
Yes, sir.
And that was that part of the additional block grant money that we received, the block
Yes.
grant R or something?
Right. And this was one of Councilman Han's top priorities. I don't want to speak for her, but from her office, this was one of their top priorities to get developed in the CD15. It's been a long history and a drawn-out history that unfortunately I can't provide that to you personally. But it hasn't been fully clean until just recently in terms of the remediation. So moving with the developer, forward with the developer, we were very, very limited in terms of the city options to it. As Nino's mentioned, the original idea was to sell it to a developer, but what we were going to be able to sell it for and receive back was about $600,000, or the fair market value out there. Nino's being one of our best finance people, I think, in the city, as well as having this development experience, that came up with this idea to ground lease it and put it out to RFP to actually see what the private marketplace would say, come back to us as a city, and we have the options to refuse them all if they're not good, and we would sit and wait. Or if we do see something good and a professional developer coming in and say, this is what we can do with the land, and this is what we'll be willing to both pay and pick up. Our interest, I think, like everyone around, is being able to see job creation in that particular part of Watts, because the unemployment rate there, like in many of the communities, is double than the city average. So that really is what is driving some of the interest.
Isn't that part of Los Angeles looking forward to getting some good quality supermarkets?
Supermarkets, it's zoned for light industrial, so we're working with Gail in the planning to see what other options we would be able to do, and if a supermarket come in. There's been some other proposals being floated about a medical facility possibly on that site. Right now, it's not under current zoning.
When we had the figures of the 300-plus jobs, what was the development they were speaking about during that discussion?
What type of jobs would they come into the development of 300?
When they
construction
spoke-
jobs.
When they spoke of the 300-plus jobs.
Those are based on money spent, $35,000 per,
No, the type of jobs.
Is that because I remember we had it in the...
manufacturing jobs.
So the issue was
Light
if they went
manufacturing job.
manufacturing, they estimated 340 permanent,
New permanent jobs, correct.
and then there was a figure as to how many jobs would be created to build the,
114 construction jobs, full-time equivalent.
so that's all the speculation as to having an RFP and a developer coming in and then creating some form of manufacturing jobs.
Correct. And also whoever develops the site, the tenants have to guarantee the minimum of the jobs required for this site, which are 346. That's the minimum.
And then also, was it some discussion as to, there were developers that have expressed an interest now that the property is clean? Do we have somebody in line?
There are some indications that some tenants might be interested to locate here if the property is built.
But somebody would have to construct what their needs are then.
Correct. Ideas to have built to suit here. First, identify the tenant and build for them rather than do speculative building and wait for a tenant to come and occupy.
The other thing, if I remember correctly, was the discussion on the construction wasn't one big box. It wasn't a situation where you're going to build several hundred square feet under one roof, but there are multiple buildings.
Yes, correct. Initial plan was to build 9 buildings on this site, some of them larger, smaller. But those are just hypothetical plans. As soon as we identify the tenants, we will build based on the tenants' need specifications. And not us, I mean, the developer has to build subject to city's approval.
Because I think she's been at this for what, has it been 5 or 6 years or that she's worked on this thing?
Right.
And I think it was just piecing the money together, get it cleaned.
Yeah, it was really the remediation.
Yeah. Now, what was it? There was something on the 108 loans, there's a time limit there, because
Right.
you're going to have to start paying, if they use it, you have, 2 years or something to start paying the loan back or something?
Right. What would happen, that would impact us more distinctly, is the nearly the $1 million of federal grant dollars we would lose out completely.
If you don't move at a certain pace.
Right.
But if the person that develops it chooses to use the 108 loans, they have a certain timeline
Exactly.
before repayment kicks in.
Right. We generally do an interest reserve fund from the loan over about 24 to 36 months, and generally it's about 16 to 20-year payback on the 108 loan. And the developer assumes that loan, not us.
Yeah, because that's what people get confused. It's not a grant, it's a loan.
Right.
108.
It is a loan to the developer.
When was this land acquired by the city? What month, what year?
August 1994, 15 years ago.
And now we're in a rush. We bought it 15 years ago, and now we need to hurry up.
Councilman, we have been negotiating since I've joined the city for almost 2 years. I've been negotiating with a developer that I inherited. We didn't have exclusive right to negotiate with them. After exhaustive negotiation, we reached the conclusion that we can never get a deal. There was no, with that developer, there was no way. So what we did, subsequent to that, did a lot of analysis, getting all the facts, and the idea is to, right now, to have authority to do a request for new proposal. That developer was selected a long time ago through another RFP. We need to do another RFP to identify a developer,
And that developer could apply again if he or she wanted.
if they wished so, yes.
Okay.
Let me ask one other thing on that recent money that was put in there. Is there a shelf life on that if the RFP comes back and there's no satisfactory
Yes, sir.
response? So that money has a shelf life to go back into the pot
Right.
for reprogramming.
Less than 2 years, and the strings attached to that money, if we don't have a project to move forward with, that money would be reprogrammed.
That money was awarded to city through NOFA. There was a Notice of Ability Fund by HUD. We applied, we received that approved for this project.
And have we worked out there was another glitch in the money that we were moving forward with a 25% human services or something, and have we gotten that approval, or is this the same money?
It's a separate issue, same money, but separate issue. This is actually considered economic development, so it's not.
I mean, there
under
was
the public
something in there
service
that
account.
we were waiting for some word back.
Right.
on-
In the overall CDBG, ARA budget, they allocated 25% under the public service cap. The rules say 15%, and the city was asking for a waiver to move it to 25%.
Did
And
we
no-
get that?
No, we have not heard back as of yet.
Because that was one of the tensions in the discussion, was that if that doesn't come through, that other, something like $2 million can get reprogrammed.
Yes, sir.
If I asked you to come back in 2 weeks so that we could take a vote on this item and to walk us through from acquisition to today and all the
Not a
categorical
problem.
funds.
Yeah.
With that?
No,
All the
yeah.
all the categorical funds that have been applied to this site
Right.
so far.
Yeah, we'll come back with a
And-
complete history.
And the documentation that was of record to the previous council in 1994 and since then, explaining as to why we should continue to work on this site, what happened when they somehow narrowed it down to one particular developer that seemed to wear you out, until you finally said, we can't do anything with this developer.
Right.
I want you to walk us through that, because I want to understand how we get in these situations where it just doesn't seem logical. I understand this is the city of Los Angeles. I understand this is a economically challenged area. I understand wanting to create jobs. I understand the federal government having certain kinds of programs where they afford us the opportunity to utilize their money so we can go ahead and create these jobs and get into agreements with developers, et cetera. Generically, I understand that, but I want this to be an example of how the heck did we apply ourselves? Did we do a good job in arriving at where we are today? Or did we convolute ourselves into saying, well, this is the best we can do now?
We'd be more than happy to come back with the full report. We do have a draft fact sheet that will also submit to your offices.
Well, double check that
and-
draft fact sheet.
Yeah, we want to make sure on here, but we will come back with a full report and history.
But I want to
to the
also
project.
make sure that you afford us the opportunity to understand what were the arguments made? What was the thinking? What was the application in the minds of the staff and the policymakers when they decided to take these steps that got us to where we are today?
Yeah, we'll do a full review of the history and the file.
Please.
And we will also bring you the current history in terms of a clarification on the resources moving forward. And then the prospective timeline. We are in a rush in terms of the timeline because of the deadlines, but we will have a more filled out RFP by then, because we're looking about the end of July. So timing works for us as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right, thank you, sir.
Okay, so we'll hear this item 2 weeks from now in this committee. Is anybody here to speak on item number 2? We're on item number 2. Public comment is open on item number 2. Seeing and hearing none. Public comment is closed on item number 2. So item number 2, we'll hold that over for 2 weeks in this committee and for those reports. And that concludes all the agendized items for this committee. General public comment is now open before this committee. Seeing and hearing no one come forward on general public comment. General public comment is now closed. This committee is now adjourned.